Well, tonight we are talking about a culture of honor, and we've been talking about this for several weeks. How do we facilitate a culture, a way of living that is honoring all the time to everybody? And tonight we're kind of launching into something, is one of my favorite things to talk about, and it basically weaves through every interaction that we have with each other and with God. Now, have you ever known somebody who seems so secure in who they are, they just love people? They walk in authority, and they're not afraid to tell the truth in love, based on whether somebody is going to get mad at them or something's going to go wrong or whatever. Have you ever known somebody like that? They have a very good blend of what we call invitation and challenge, which is what we're talking about tonight. And Jesus was the master at this. He had this amazing ability to hold invitation and challenge in his hand in this powerfully impactful way. And what it did was maximize people's potential. If you think about the disciples when he first met them, and then you think about who they were 3 years later, it is unbelievable how far he took them because of this intentionality in invitation and challenge. Now, when we start talking about this, we're discussing the ability to let people in, to build trust, to instill confidence in people, in who they are. So reminding people all the time of who they are and how they're made, but also to let them know what's allowed and what's not allowed in a particular culture or tribe. Really, to keep a culture of honor, there have to be some things that are not okay. And that's where challenge comes in. So invitation is love and grace and acceptance and nice and ooey gooey. And challenge is like, nope, back up off that. That is not okay. And where we get this concept, kind of where we get this language, is from a man called the Horse Whisperer, Monty Roberts. There's this man decades ago, he saw the way his father trained horses. And the way his father trained horses was to tie them to a tree and beat them until they basically had no more will. And that's what we call challenge with no invitation, okay? And he said there's got to be a better way, because he also saw that's what he did to him when he wanted him to submit to his will. And he thought there's no way violence and pain is always the way. I'm going to just watch for a little bit. And so he took a step back and he observed how horses interact with each other. And he learned this language that takes them to the point where they first come in until they're completely embraced in a herd. Yes, a herd, and until the moment of equus, which you'll hear him mention on this video, which you're going to play in a second, which is join up. And so watch how he does this. He takes this wild Mustang he's never met before. In 23 minutes, he takes him to having a horse and a rider. It's just unbelievable how he calibrates invitation challenge. You'll see challenge first, and then you'll see some invitation come in. Let's go ahead and play that video.
There you go. Oh, my goodness. That's a pretty wild-looking place. So, I say you want to go away? That's fine. Go on away. But don't go away a little. Go away a lot. Now, we know that we want her to go both ways because the flight animal is that sort that investigates every opportunity to flee in directions whatever available. And in a round pen, you essentially have a direction left and a direction right available to you. I use this light line so that if it should go out there and hit her, it can't cause her any pain. Because pain would be exactly what we don't want. Now we've done both directions, and we'll take the pressure off, and we'll start thinking equus. We'll watch for this conversation, and it's coming fast. This ear closest to me is locked on. She's already brought her head off that wall twice now, wanting to come in closer. My eyes on eyes, shoulders square, pushing away. There's licking and chewing. Very nice. Very nice. We've nailed our prediction on the licking and chewing. And there's the bowing down. There's the bowing down. Very nice. Super good girl. That's so demonstrative right there. That's just as you see the Mustang do it. There's the licking and chewing again. Quite good. Very good conversation. I will go passive the next round. Take my left shoulder by, and then drop my eyes away from her eyes and reverse the whole procedure. There we go. I'll get myself on a 45 now and invite her in. Very nice. Super good girl. There is the moment of join up. You are a good girl. So I'll tell her how nice she is for coming in here. Invite her into my chest, standing right in front. Don't look her in the eye. I've already done that, and that means go away. Now I want her to be here with me, and she's finding value. And that's join up, and now I'll walk away and attempt to get follow-up. Wonderful. Wonderful. Good follow-up. And this is the first saddle of her life. And there it is. That's the first saddle of her life. Oh, good girl. Oh, good girl. Oh, ho. My pulse rate is not up a tick. I don't care if she wants to buck. That's to be expected. It's all right. I just want to be sure this saddle will ride her. And if it's the first saddle of her life, and it is, she ought to buck with it. We belly over at first. And I just want her to carry his weight. He could jump back out of there if she decided that she wanted to take a jump. But it's amazing when you get their confidence that the joined up horse looks up at his first rider, not as an adversary, but as a partner. Very good. Okay.
23 minutes. That whole process took. Isn't that unbelievable? Well, if this guy, he basically used invitation challenge. I don't know if you saw it. In the very beginning, his language is straight on, glaring this horse down. If you want to come in closer, you're going to have to submit a little bit. You got to give up a little bit of what you're doing and who you are. And that's where he talks about the biting and licking. It's kind of the way that, the adrenaline starts to come down when a horse starts to do that, and then bowing of the head and all this stuff. The second he turns away, which to a horse is showing the flank is the weak part of their body, it shows that new person, that new horse, that he can come in closer. And that's kind of just showing kind of their vulnerable spot. So as soon as he turns away, you saw how the horse came in. And then as soon as he starts to walk off, it's there. I mean, join up. Whereas father would take weeks of beating horses, this man took 23 minutes to take, just by using their language. And it's a language of invitation and challenge. Bringing them in close and then staring them down. And then bringing them in close and then staring them down. It continues to happen after they're inside the herd. So if this man is the horse whisperer, we're going to talk about Jesus tonight as the people whisperer, okay? Because he was unbelievable at this calibration of invitation and challenge. And when we're talking about creating a culture of honor, we have to grasp what this looks like to have a good blend of invitation and challenge. So invitation, this is what invitation is. It's giving access to bring someone closer into relationship. It's giving access to someone, and it's the act of inviting them in. Not just saying, I'm here, but saying, here's how you can come closer. This involves giving our time and attention, grace, forgiveness, gentleness, affirmation, and understanding. This is where we go to someone and we say, help me understand. Perhaps they've done something horrific to you, but you're still able to come and say, I want this to be better. I'm forgiving you for this. I'm accepting you for who you are, etc. All of that acceptance. Jesus was amazing at this, and we'll look at it in a second. Challenge is coming against faulty thoughts, behaviors, or worldviews that will ultimately keep that person from reaching his or her full potential. That's where the love comes in with this. It involves truth, pushing into uncomfortable territory, rebuke, and correction. Okay, now that one doesn't sound as fun, right? It's actually not fun to anybody. You say, who's it uncomfortable to? Everybody. It's uncomfortable to the person doing it. It's uncomfortable to the person receiving it. It's hard. Challenge is hard, harder for some than others. But we're going to look at how Jesus did this really well. He did both of these things really well. How did Jesus invite? How was he inviting? Well, first of all, he met people where they were. This is an amazing thing about Jesus. If you read through the Gospels, you'll see this again and again. The Pharisees made it hard for people to connect with them. They made it hard for people to connect with God. They set up rules and boundaries. They took the law and then they set rules outside of the law again and again and again to say, well, we don't want anybody to get close to actually violating that law. And so let's set up another one a little further out. And they put burdens on people that they could never get close enough to God. I mean, you see the way people are interacting with the Pharisees. They're afraid of them, right? They never met people where they were. They said, here's where I'm going to be from 8 to 4:30. Come and find me. Jesus always went to where people were. He doesn't, even how he calls the disciples, and we'll just look at one real quick, and that's Matthew, and Luke 5:27 through 28. These versions, a lot of these versions call him Levi, because that's his Jewish name, but it's Matthew and Levi, it's the same person. It says, later as Jesus left town, he saw a tax collector named Levi sitting where? Where was Levi? He wasn't in the temple where he was going to interact with the rabbi, was he? He wasn't even in a prayer meeting. He wasn't at vigil, our 6-hour prayer meeting last night or Friday night. He wasn't in any kind of spiritual space. He was sitting where he always sits, doing his job, doing his really crummy job where he stole from people and ripped people off. That's where Matthew was when Jesus found him and said, follow me and be my disciple. So Levi got up, left everything, and followed him. And then right after that, we see how Jesus went to his house and met all his friends. And Matthew's entire life was changed from that point on. He went to where he was. He didn't expect him to come to where he was. Let's look at Zacchaeus, another tax collector. The tax collectors were really bad people, you know. They were cheating from their own people, skimming off the top, making themselves wealthy off of other Jews and giving, you know, some of it to the Romans and keeping some of it for themselves. That's why we read in the Gospels over and over how bad the tax collectors were, because they were not only greedy and sinning, but they were traitors to their people. So it says, Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich off of other people, off of his friends, off of his neighbors. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. I can relate. So he ran ahead and climbed a fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. When Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. Zacchaeus, he said, quick, come down. I must be a guest. Where? In your home. I'm going to go to your house. Eric always says he has the spiritual gift of inviting himself over. This is what Jesus had here. We see him displaying it. The gift of receiving, he says. If you have the gift of giving, I have the gift of receiving. It works out. I must be a guest in your home today. Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. Why? You know, it's not like us who are like, oh man, I got to go clean the house. He's like, this amazing person wants to eat with me, which was a form of covenant between two people in that day. It's not just like you're going to go to Smash Burger and, you know, you're going to share a meal and you get the fries and I get the burger and nobody thinks anything of it today. To sit down and eat with someone showed a covenant that you were engaging. That's why you see the Pharisees again and again and again saying, how can you sit down and eat with these people? It wasn't because their hands were dirty, you know, or they were drinking substances that they didn't approve of, although I'm sure that was happening too. It was because you're showing that you're in relationship with those people and those people are sinners. So Zacchaeus, think of the invitation here that Jesus is extending. He's not just saying, sure, let's go do something. He's saying, I will come into your space, into your area with all of your people and your friends. I will come where you are and make covenant with you if you want it with me. So, of course, he jumps down and says, woo, but the people, of course, were displeased. He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner. They grow up, notorious sinner. I love how the NLT puts that so often. A well-known sinner. Jesus loved doing this. He loved taking well-known sinners and turning them around and showing the world what he could make of them, right? And then Nicodemus. This is one of my favorite stories of Nicodemus in John 3, because Nicodemus was a Pharisee. Now, Pharisees get really bad raps, and they should, because only every once in a while do you see one of them willing to come to Jesus. Nicodemus is one of them. But you notice when he comes. After dark. And John found it important to even tell us that. It's not even just that he came to Jesus. He came to him after dark when none of his buddies would know what he was up to. Because Nicodemus wasn't quite ready to follow the Jesus train, you know. He's going to probably lose everything if he actually signs on with Jesus. Think about everybody he's ever known, gone to school with, all of his co-workers, if you will, hate Jesus or trying to get him killed. Nicodemus comes to him, and he comes to him ashamed. He comes to him embarrassed that he's even meeting with him, and yet Jesus has this amazing conversation with him over the course of John 3 about rebirth and all these amazing things about how to be born again, how to know God, how to get past, oh, you're a big deal, woo-woo. This is how you have to come to God. He has all this conversation with him. He doesn't say, really? You're ashamed of me? Get out of here. He meets him where he is. That's where Nicodemus is. That's where he's starting, and that's where Jesus goes. He always meets people where they are, which is a really beautiful thing about him. If they were sincere, he would go to great lengths. If Jesus can leave heaven and come to earth as a baby, actually as a zygote, I guess, and go from there, I think he puts a lot of intentionality toward coming to us, right? It's unbelievable to what lengths he'll go to make us feel comfortable. The second thing is, with invitation, he gave people value. The woman at the well in John 4, this is just an amazing story of Jesus giving someone value who typically did not receive it in this culture. She was a Samaritan. She was a woman. And she was kind of a harlot, right? As we find out about her life. She's had lots of husbands. The one she's with right now is not her husband. He digs into all of that. She's got 3 strikes against her, and they're really bad. And actually, the first 2 are probably worse than the third. She's a woman. You don't talk to a woman. A Jewish rabbi never talked to a woman. Women were not expected to be spoken to. Until Jesus came, there had never been a female disciple. Let that rest in your brain for a second. Not a single woman on the earth had been able to say, I follow that rabbi, I'm his disciple. Never. There was never a female rabbi. There was never anything like this. There's a woman. Women aren't for that. We like to think that Jewish society was really great, but it was pretty horribly oppressive to women in that day. She's a woman who is not worthy to be spoken to, and he's a rabbi, so he's a big deal, and she's a Samaritan, which is a half-breed, right? All the Samaritans were the ones who couldn't cut it and be really Jewish. They were the product of intermarriage between Jewish people and Gentiles. That's who the Samaritans were. They were really looked down upon. They were dogs, basically, to the Jews. And here's a Jewish rabbi talking to a Samaritan woman, and he knows all about her, right? He knows prophetically when he starts to speak to her what she's doing with her life and what she's engaging in, and he still takes time to talk to her. Think about the value he is giving her. You are worth my time. You are worth my conversation. He engages in one of the most theological discussions he ever does with anybody, with this Samaritan woman. He took time to be with people, to speak to people, to hear people. Unbelievable. And then there's this woman, in some of the older translations it says a woman with the issue of blood. That's how we know her. We don't know her name. She's this woman who had real problems with bleeding that would have made her unclean. And sometimes we miss this because, we don't know all the Jewish laws. But basically, if you're bleeding, you're unclean. She should have been outside of the city, really. She should not have been even there. She should not have been in a crowd. And she certainly shouldn't have touched a rabbi. Now she's made him unclean. This is how the rules worked. If you're unclean and you touch somebody, that person's unclean. Jesus should have gone outside the camp. There's all these rules and regulations according to the law. And Jesus said, I don't really care about any of that. Because here's a person here who has faith. In Luke 8, she comes, she gets in the crowd, she touches Jesus, and it says healing goes out from him, and she's healed right away. After 12 years of this problem, going to every doctor, spending all her money, that's what Luke tells us. It says when the woman realized that she could not stay hidden because he's looking around for who was this, who touched me, she began to tremble and fall and fell to her knees in front of him. Why was she trembling? Because she's not supposed to be there. And she's expecting, I'm in trouble. Not only did I get in this place, but now I am pegged, I'm busted, he's figured me out, everybody's going to be mad. Now he's supposed to be on his way to heal this other person who needs it. He's going to have to go outside the camp. She's in trouble. So she's trembling. She falls to her knees in front of him. And let's not forget that according to the law, she was in trouble. According to the rules, he should have rebuked her, but he doesn't. This is what he says. The whole crowd heard her explain why she had touched him and that she'd immediately be healed. And he says, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. He says, daughter, I guarantee you no man had ever spoken to her that way before. Daughter. Think of the worth and the value. Instead of all the fear and the pain that she was expecting, he not only doesn't do that, he goes further to say, hey, you're beautiful and you're awesome and your faith is why we're all standing here tonight. And guess what? God is getting glory for it because you went out of your way to have some faith that you could just reach out and touch the hem of my garment and be healed. That's faith. People were pushing against him the whole time and no one else got healed in that moment but her. Man, he loved people. Look at Peter in Matthew 16. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? Who do people say that I am? Well, they replied, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. Then he asked them, but who do you say I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, you are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any human being. Now I say to you that you are Peter, which means little rock, and upon this rock, himself, I will build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it. He's giving him a new name in a sense, even though Peter is his name. He'd been called Simon up to that. He says, you're this little rock that now I'm bringing into covenant with me. And when God calls somebody into covenant with him, he changes their name often. And look, you're now part of this big thing that's happening. I'm going to build my church on me, and you get to be a part of that. And I will give you, think of this invitation, I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven, and whatever you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven. Saying, if you enter this covenant with me, you will have kingdom power beyond what you can imagine. And because you recognize me for who I am, you're coming in closer to that covenant. What a great invitation Jesus gives. He gave people value. He affirmed the disciples again and again for what they were doing right. It's a really beautiful thing. That's what invitation does. It goes out of its way to look for what's good, what's right, and affirm it. And then the last way that Jesus was a rock star at invitation, and there's 1,000 different ways, but these are the 3 that I wanted to talk about tonight. He offered grace in repentance, even when judgment was prescribed. What do I mean by that? When people were repentant, he offered grace. Now, we'll see in just a minute, he didn't offer the exact same thing when people weren't repentant. But when people were broken and understood and were like this woman, fear and trembling before him, he offered grace. There's this woman in John 8 who's caught in adultery. Now, clearly, the dude is somewhere, right? Because it takes 2 to tango. So he was not in trouble somehow, but she was because of the law. They bring this woman before Jesus, throw her down, say she should be stoned. This is what the law says. And it was. That is what the law says. And there's this great story where Jesus bends down and he writes in the sand something that nobody knows what he wrote. Some people think the sins of all the people who were standing around, things like that. But basically, they're just standing there like, hello, we're waiting for a response here. Do we throw stones? Or we finally got him trapped, And he stands up and he says, whoever hasn't sinned, go ahead and throw the first one. And one by one, it says they go away. The eldest ones first, probably because they have a lot in their brains stored up over many years. Like, oh, yeah, I should probably walk away first. Or maybe they're the wisest, the first to feel like, woo, he just read our mail, so we're just going to leave. He literally saved her life. Call that invitation. He stands up and he says, hey, where are all your accusers? And she says, they all went away. He says, none of them condemn you? She says, I guess not. I thought I was going to die, but here I am. And he says, I don't condemn you either. Go and stop sinning. Amazing invitation he had. He could have done 1,000 different things and been completely justified for them. In Luke 12, this amazing passage, I love this scripture. I try to remind myself of it often. But someone who does not know and then does something wrong will be punished only lightly. When someone has been given much, much will be required in return. And when someone has been entrusted with much, even more will be required. What is it saying? We're trying to be patient with our 3-year-old because I just have this dream that this week as the other 2 go to school, he'll just somehow fall in line and stop screaming and saying no and saying, you're being mean, Mommy. I'm like, these other 2 never did this. Today, Eric and I were looking at each other like, seriously, what do we do with this kid? Like, we have no idea what to do with this kid sometimes. I mean, he's wonderful sometimes, but he doesn't have quite as much responsibility yet as Cadence, who's 6, right? Now, he's got a lot, and he knows what's right and wrong already. He's known for a long time. Today we were at the pool, and Eric's like, do you think he understands? I'm like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, he understands. But he doesn't have quite the level of responsibility. Someone who has just come to the Lord and is sifting through everything, when I've been serving God for 30 years, may not have quite the same level of responsibility. The level of punishment for what, Jesus comes to them and says, okay, maybe you didn't quite know this. So here's what I'm going to tell you about this. Don't do it again, but I'm going to give you some grace. It's a little different than someone who's been in and out and knows the Bible and knows what to do. He expects a little bit more because by that point, we are teachers. We are leaders. We are people that other people are watching. During the vigil the other night, somebody, it was Katie, was leading through praying for leaders. And the image is just always coming to my head of being a sheep from the front and a shepherd from the back. So anybody who leads is following somebody as a sheep, right? And somebody is coming along behind and sees them as a shepherd. That's what leadership is. We're still always following while we're leading. If we stop following, we're in big trouble. And eventually we're going to turn around and nobody's going to be wanting to go wherever we go. That's part of the deal, is that when we have been given much, we're expected. A lot is expected of us. Romans 5:8, this is what Jesus did for us. He showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. Talk about invitation. Talk about offering forgiveness and grace when really nothing was telling him he had to extend it. Everything that he did for us from start to finish, and what we're going to celebrate in just a little bit in communion, is his invitation to us. I have come, I have paid the price, I have redeemed you on my end. The price is paid. Now it's up to you if you want to come and receive it or not. Now, Jesus also challenged. So he was a master at inviting people, at giving them value, at accepting them, at giving them time, and saying, hey, if you want to follow me, come along. Now, he's not going to stay still for very long, but if you want to follow him, jump up and go along with him. You might have some pain and heartache along the way, but you're welcome, right? Many, many people came to follow him, and he let them. But he also challenged. And remember, when we challenge, here's the first way he did this. He came against a way of thinking and behaving that wasn't in line with the kingdom. Jesus had no problem coming against those things when he saw them and said, no, I am here to teach and demonstrate the kingdom of God, and that is not it. All the time we see him doing this. He had no problem confronting what was wrong and what was a lie, and what was just sometimes culture and what was sometimes just as expected. You know, people saying, oh, praise your mother for giving birth to you, because that's what women were for in the day, to give birth to really great men. And he said, no, that's a cultural thing that's gotten way out of whack. People are blessed when they serve God and are part of his kingdom. Like, he was always coming against stuff. As a prophet in Jesus, he could not let something stand by and go without challenging it if it was against the kingdom of God. He did this sometimes with his disciples. So we see this great interaction in Mark 10 where James and John asked to be specially honored. Well, they send their mother, actually, to say, can they sit on your right and left when you come into your kingdom? Because obviously that's going to be awesome. And I really want them to be the hot shots. Look at them. They're really great boys, right? They're unbelievable. We kind of know that it was really James and John behind it, but, this was the way they did it. And look at this. They asked this ridiculous thing. Jesus is like, you have no idea what you're asking. Can you drink from this cup? And they're like, uh-huh. Now, they're in D1. This is what we call D1. They have no idea what that means. Persecution and death. John was not martyred. He was only one of the original 12 disciples, and I guess Judas wasn't martyred. But the other 10 were killed in gruesome, horrible ways, including James, the first one to die. John was the last one alive after, all kinds of ways they had tried to kill him, according to church history. They had no idea what they were getting themselves into. But Jesus knew, okay, yeah, you probably will. You'll be fine. And as he's going through all of this, the other disciples hear what's happening. And it says, when they heard what James and John had asked, they were indignant. Now, they hadn't had the guts to ask, right? But they were pretty indignant when they're like, oh, you're trying to get ahead of us? What are you talking about? You weren't even the first ones in the door with this dude. They get all competitive and going against each other. So Jesus called them together and said, you know that the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. But among you it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you must be the slave of everyone else. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. And of course, we see him later tying the washcloth around his waist and washing their feet. So he was always saying, that is not the way we're going. This is the way we're going. He was not afraid to challenge this in his followers. He also wasn't afraid to challenge it in his enemies. And here's where we do see, read Matthew 26. It will make the hair on your arms stand up and hope Jesus never, ever talks to you this way. It is a whole chapter full of the Pharisees being broods of vipers and whitewashed tombs and all sorts of things that you really don't want to hear. He was not afraid to tell them. You have these instances of the disciples afterwards like, did you realize you offended them? Like, he's the biggest moron on the planet because obviously it's offensive to call someone a brood of vipers. I mean, look at what he says in just this one little excerpt. 15 and 16. What sorrow awaits you teachers of religious law and you Pharisees, hypocrites! For you cross land and sea to make one convert, and then you turn that person into twice the child of hell you yourselves are. Blind guides, what sorrow awaits you. That's just a little snippet. Think about all the things he said. They're sitting there like, I mean, he is not afraid. Jesus does not back down from calling out what is not okay. You want to put all this stuff on all these people? You can't even bear that yourself. You want to keep them away from God because you're so religious that you can't even see what a relationship with Him looks like. You won't humble yourself to come into the kingdom, but you won't let them come either. I mean, he just bashes them because it's not okay what they're doing. He never has a problem with calling out things that aren't right, that are against the kingdom of God. That's challenge. Another way, he called people to a high standard. He called people who were going to follow him to a high standard. He never watered down what it meant to be a disciple, not a single time. The way we invite people to become Christians these days is unbelievable to me. We beg and we plead and we say, you don't really have to do anything. You just maybe show up every once in a while and don't give up any of your sin. That's okay. We'll just let you keep whatever you have. Just add Jesus to it and he'll bring you joy. Lies, lies, lies. Jesus was not afraid to say, this is what it really costs. Now, it's worth a lot more. But it is going to cost you a whole lot. It's actually going to cost you your entire life. You're going to have to lay down everything else. Look at what he says in Luke 14, 25 through 27. A large crowd was following Jesus. And then guess what he does? He does this again and again and again. He turns around and he basically gives them this unbelievably hard, heavy truth that will drive some of them away. Think about it for a second. This is a challenge. If you want to be my disciple, you must, by comparison, hate everyone else. Your mother and father, your wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even your own life. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. And if you do not carry your own cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. Now, we think of the cross, it's a pretty thing we put on necklaces. But when he said, carry your cross, they were thinking torture, death, humiliation. He's telling them, oh, look, there's a large crowd. Better weed it out a little. I mean, this is what Jesus did again and again. Weed that puppy out and let's see who really wants to follow when they see the cost. Now, we receive everything, That's the beauty. But it costs us everything. And that meant he lost people. John 6:66, interestingly. It says, many of his disciples deserted him. This is when he turns around and he asks the rest of his disciples, are you going to leave me too? The 12. And they say, well, where are we going to go? You've got the words of life. There's nobody else who has this. Isn't that interesting? We get a taste of the cost. That's what happens all the time. When God starts challenging people, I watch it happen. They come to him, they receive all this invitation, fall at his feet, receive all the grace, all the forgiveness, all the acceptance. And then the first time he says, let go of that. They're out the door. Now, it doesn't always happen, but often. That's called challenge. It's really tough. What do you mean? Nobody told me we have to give up stuff. This is supposed to be about getting more. But then, the ones that are really smart, after they wander away, they realize, where am I going? It's a barren wasteland now. There's nothing out here for me. Even though I have to give up everything, I think I'm going to. It's a really fascinating thing to watch invitation happen between God and a new believer. Because they're bouncing back and forth, and that saddle comes on, and they start bucking, right? Now remember, he doesn't say, when you come to me, you're free of all yokes. He says, come to me and I'll give you my yoke. You do get a yoke. It's just his. And it's light and easy because he's carrying the weight of it and we're like dangling on the other side. The yoke, 2 oxen like yoked together. One is bearing everything, and the other one's just kind of like along for the ride. So it's easy, but there is a yoke. We don't just get to go off and do whatever we want. There is a cost, and he was really honest about it. Look at what he says, the rich young ruler, Mark 10. I know we're going through a ton of scripture. Sometimes we just do one story. So tonight, I'm like, I just want to prove to you how good Jesus was at this so we can pull some things out for ourselves. And Mark 10, this rich young man comes and he says, what do I need to do? And he says, obey the commandments. And he says, I've been doing that my whole life. Looking at the man, Jesus felt genuine love for him. There's still one thing you haven't done, he told them. Go and sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me. At this, the man's face fell, and he went away sad, for he had many possessions. Now, here's a time Jesus asked him to do something that's not in the law. Nobody prescribed that this dude has to go do that. But obviously he knows, and Jesus doesn't ask everybody to do this, does he? Who comes and follows him. But he knows where his heart is. And he asks him to give up the one thing that he knows he doesn't want to give up. And think of this, he felt genuine love for him. Think about how hard that is. He's already got the invitation thing down because Jesus was stinking good at loving people. He loves him genuinely. I bet you he's already thinking, if it were me, I'd be thinking, what kind of potential is in this person? What could I do with this person as my disciple? Think about the generations of disciples that could be made. He loves him, and yet he lets him walk away because he's not willing to give up what he has to give up. He doesn't chase him down. He doesn't run after him. He doesn't water it down. That's what we do so often. Hold on. 50%, 10%, 10%. That's the tithe, right? He says, give it all, or you're not going to follow me long anyway, if you're not willing to give it up. He expected a lot from those who followed him. That's what challenge does. You have high expectations. But in doing that, we honor each other, right? Because if I believe you can do something and I want to lift you up to that, it might seem like, oh, man, she's hard. It's because I see what's the potential, what's possible. That's what Jesus did when he called people up and said, hey, take up your cross and follow me. Drink my blood or eat my flesh, or you can't have any part of me. You know what he's saying? I believe that you can do those things. And that's what challenge does. It instills this confidence in us. If our rabbi believes we can do that, then we can. And then last, he always told the truth. Jesus always told the truth, even if it cost him something. About himself, about the Father, about others. He was always sincere. And he always told the truth in the way that would be most helpful to that person. So think about the examples I gave before at invitation. Let me just finish some of those stories for you. He spoke into Matthew's life. Matthew started following him. I doubt he ever stole from anybody ever again. We know Zacchaeus didn't, because after he spends the evening with Jesus, it says he gave away half his wealth to the poor, and he paid people back 4 times what he had stolen from their taxes. So there was some challenge happening somewhere in that conversation for Zacchaeus to come out of there ready to get his life together. He didn't just walk away saying, oh, now I feel good about myself. I'll just keep doing what I've been doing, right? Nicodemus, Jesus was a little hard on him. He invited him into that conversation, but he didn't let him off the hook. Because to Nicodemus, he was already there. He was already fine. He didn't need anything else. He's a Pharisee. He's a Jew. Jesus said, no, son, you have to be reborn. It is not okay what you already have. The woman at the well, he brought her sin into the light. Think about how uncomfortable. She's like, this thing, and where are we supposed to worship? And he's like, go call your husband. Talk about uncomfortable segue. It's like, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit and talk about what's really happening in your life. Because you can talk big and all this intellectual sphere up here, but what's going on in your actual life? He put his finger right on it. He didn't back off that at all. Peter, right after he affirms this declaration, and he gives them this amazing invitation, right after, he says, oh, by the way, guys, I'm going to be killed in Jerusalem. And Peter's like, no, you'll never be killed. He must have come in front of Jesus, which is not where a disciple belongs. And he says, get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the things of God. Because guess what? Jesus probably didn't want to go to the cross. And here's somebody telling him, you can skip all that. That's basically what Satan did in the wilderness when he tempted him. You can skip all that pain and suffering. And he's like, whoa. Now you're in cahoots with something bad. And literally 10 seconds after this amazing invitation, he is calling Peter Satan. That's called challenge. That's a pretty intense challenge. And then the woman caught in adultery. He doesn't just say, bless you. He says, stop sinning. Stop doing what you're doing because you're going to end up dead. And by the way, all of this junk, now had he had an opportunity to speak to the man, maybe he would have gotten through to him too. But all the junk you're doing is standing in the way between you and God. You will never be near him the way you want to be unless you stop sinning. He invites her. He saves her life. He gives her value. And then he says, cut it out. It's not good for you. That's challenge. Now, let's not confuse telling the truth in invitation with flattery. And here's the deal. Here's what flattery means. Flattery is to praise someone in a way that is not sincere. Why do people flatter people? Have you ever seen somebody just flatter somebody? I don't know. Oh, I can't handle it. Like, what are you getting out of this? Just makes me feel dirty. Why are you doing that? It's insincere. Now, praise, real invitation, true affirmation, like we've been talking about in a culture of honor, that's different because it's sincere. And I can go way out of my way to find things. I will go really far to look for things, to find things to praise sincerely. But insincerity, that's not what Jesus did. You know why? He had nothing to gain from anything. He already had everything. He didn't need anything from anybody, so he never flattered. That is not the same as telling the truth. I love this with challenge. The guy, we saw the video, he says this when the horse is bucking. He says, my pulse rate is not up a tick. I don't care if she wants to buck. That's all right. And if it's the first saddle of her life, she ought to buck. Remember when he said that? I've watched this happen with people again and again as we're in community together, which is where we're going with this, right? First time the saddle comes on. Well, nobody's ever told me that before. Nobody ever actually has ever expected me to grow. I didn't know somebody's going to come in my life and put their finger on something. I've been a part of a church for decades and nobody's ever challenged me. Well, welcome to discipleship the way Jesus did it. There goes the saddle. Completely appropriate, and I'm waiting for the bucking. You know what I'm saying? Why not? You've never felt this before. But if we trust each other, if we know that that invitation is solid, if you know that I love you and that I would not be saying this, or that your sister or brother would not be saying this if it weren't actually going to help you, then we can simmer down a little bit, take a deep breath and say, that's not fun right there, but I'll take it because I know it's good. I want to show you one video that exemplifies this really well. It's from the show Parenthood. And what's happened right before this, let me introduce it real quick, is Amber, the young woman, this is like season 2, got in a car accident because she's all like angsty and rebellious, and she gets in the car with a dude who's drunk, and she gets in this accident that almost kills her. So everybody's been trying to get through to her. Her mother's been trying to get through to her, and there's a conversation here with her grandfather that's got a lot of good invitation and challenge.
So, what's this all about?
I want you to see something. Recognize him?
Yeah, it's the car. It's Gary's car.
Mm-hmm. Come here, take a look. You looking?
Yeah, I see it.
Amber, you know, I was 2 years in Vietnam. Do you know what I thought about? What I dreamt about? Was coming home. And having a family. Having grandkids. I dreamt you, Amber. And Hattie. And Drew. And Sydney. Jabbar. And Max. And we almost lost you, Amber. I know, you had some bad breaks. Not feeling good about yourself. Didn't get into Berkeley. Well, boo friggin' who. Yeah, suck it up, girl. You're a braverman. You got my blood in your veins. Now, you ever do something like this again? You even think about doing something like this, I will personally kick your little butt all the way from here to the Golden Gate Bridge. You do not have my permission to mess with my dreams. Are we clear? Good. Buy you a burger.
Zeke Braverman, a master at Invitation Challenge. Did you see that? He tells her that he loves her and that he dreamed of her and that he dreams of things for her life. And then he lays into her, right? Says, cut it out. You're messing with this whole family. A master. Now, this is where we can get off base, and we'll just look at this for 1 sec before we take communion. But there's this little matrix of invitation and challenge. And as a culture, as a community, we can get off one way or the other. So if we have low challenge and low invitation, it's just straight up boring. Like nobody's doing anything, nobody's moving anywhere, nobody's loving each other. I have been part of those communities before. It is absolutely boring. If we have low challenge and high invitation, that's all the love but none of the truth. Grace but no truth. It's cozy. It's consumers. This is where a whole lot of the American church is at, to be completely honest. A couple of people doing a whole lot of work for everybody else to come and consume a program. That is not what discipleship looks like to Jesus. If we have high challenge and low invitation, we expect a lot from each other, but we don't give the relationship and we don't give the resources to get it done. It's stressful. And we have a lot of people discouraged and burn out. But if we have high invitation and high challenge, just like Jesus did, this is an empowered, discipling culture where people are feeling love all the time and they're feeling challenged all the time. They're feeling like someone believes that I can do more, but they're also there for me if I don't do more. Do you know what I mean? There's safety in it, there's love in it, there's acceptance in it, but there's a, you're too comfortable. Get out. Go do something you're uncomfortable with. That is a beautiful culture of honor if we can grasp all these things together in our community. Jesus was a master, people whisperer, if you will. He pulled people in and then he stared them down. He pulled them in, he stared them down. He still does that with us, right? At least I feel it often. You know, I don't know if it's I took martial arts for 12 years or I don't know. Maybe it's just the way I'm made. I don't mind strong challenge. I like direct confrontation. It's just the way I'm wired. It doesn't really make me back down. Sometimes it stings, but for me, it's preferable than trying to read into things, and I'm very bad at picking up on cues. If somebody says no, but they really mean yes, I'm done. I don't know how to talk at this point. Say the words you mean. I like challenge. I'm happy with challenge, and I've been working very, very hard on invitation. Because here's the deal. We're all wired a different way. To some of you, you're super loving and graceful, and everybody always feels that super high approachability around you. And for others, you naturally go to challenge. You have no problem receiving it or giving it. But you're not allowed to give it until you've built up some invitation, right? We're not allowed to just say what we think all the time. We've got to earn the right to do that. Jesus sometimes did it in a half a second. So this is what we're asking tonight. When we ask, what is God saying to me? What am I going to do about it? Tonight with invitation, we are asking, do I invite people the way Jesus did? Do I meet people where they are? Do I give people value? Do I offer grace when people are repentant? Do I do these things? Am I going out of my way to go find somebody, not when they're cleaned up and ready, but when they have nothing and they're lost in their sin, just as I was when Jesus came and found me? Do I take time? You know how we give each other value? We spend time with each other. That's how we give each other value, right? If I really believe in you and love you, I think I want you in my life. We take time. Are we taking time for each other, really? Do we let things go? Do we forgive? Do we allow people space to grow and not require that they be right where we want them all the time? And then do I challenge people as Jesus did? Do I come against a way of thinking, behaving that doesn't line up with the kingdom of God? Sometimes people appreciate that, and sometimes they don't. Am I willing to speak out against injustice, even if it makes me unpopular or on occasion the bad guy? Do I call people to a high standard? Do I believe that they can be more? And so I say, hey, that's great. Let's go further. Now, if invitation isn't there, we're not going to be able to do this. And do I always tell the truth? Because you know what? That direction that you're going right now is going to lead you down a really bad path. And you're going to want to stop that as soon as you can. I love you, right? You know I love you? You know we're good? Okay. Then let's deal with the problem. That's how we grow. Can you fathom? I don't know if I've ever been a part of a community that is really great at both of these things, where people just do that all the time, naturally. They love each other, and they accept each other, and then they call out each other's crap. Because when we do that, we get better. I've seen this go back and forth in my life, even in huddles. There'll be one intense one, and then the next one, I just feel like, man, I just really need to celebrate where everybody's growing. Simple, tiny little steps. Because, too much challenge, you suffocate, right? I need somebody to clap for me. Okay, that's invitation. Too much invitation, everybody just stays, yeah, we're all playing, we're having fun. Nobody ever gets anywhere. And we have a big family business, which is the kingdom of God coming to the earth as it is in heaven. We got to do some stuff, which takes challenge. So are we really processing this well? Now, here's what we're going to do for communion tonight. Guys, go ahead and bring up those elements, and we're going to have the worship team come forward, and they're going to do one last song. And we really like doing the last song at the end because that gives us a few moments of reflection, time to really reflect on what God's saying. And so how we're going to do communion tonight is during the course of this song, I'm going to invite you to just come up and take bread and juice, if you want to take communion tonight, and hold on to it until the end, because we'll all take it together after the song is over. I do want to give an opportunity, though, if there's anyone here, you say, I don't really know God. Because the beautiful thing is, if this is going to be your first communion, that's pretty sweet, right? So I'm just going to ask everybody to just bow your head, close your eyes, so nobody's looking around but me. And just give an opportunity. If there's anyone here tonight, you say, I don't really know that I know God. You're talking about covenant and relationship and God speaking to you, and I don't know what any of that means, but I would like to start on the journey. I'm just going to ask you, if you want to make that decision tonight, to just lift up your head and make eye contact with me so that I know who you are, so that we can be praying with you, we can help you on the journey. Okay, Lord, I love you. Thank you for being so good, for inviting us and challenging us, for believing that we can be more than we are. And tonight, we think of your invitation and your challenge, your invitation to say, hey, you can have me. And your challenge to say, it's going to cost you everything. And tonight, however we need to process that, Lord, however we need to process that challenge, anything we need to give up or lay down, you have permission to put your finger on it tonight.